is the Forbes Books Podcast, conversations with amazing humans who are impacting the world of business and beyond. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and joining me today is financial trailblazer Gigi Gonzalez. As an influential TikTok star and author of the new book, Cultura and Cash, Gigi is empowering young Latinas to take charge of their financial futures. She provides relatable money advice tailored to the unique cultural dynamics within Latina households and families. She's leading by example, going from quitting her corporate career during the Great Resignation to now uplifting a new generation of women toward financial freedom. Gigi, welcome.
Hi, Joe. Thank you for having me on the show.
You're very welcome. And even though I'm as white as Casper the Friendly Ghost, I do come from a Latino background. My mother's Cuban, my father's from Spain. So I feel a lot of where you're coming from. Obviously, I'm a little older than you, different gen. I'm Gen X, you're the Gen Z.
I'm millennial. I know I look young, but I'm millennial.
So you're a millennial, but your main audience is Gen Z. And one of the things I wanted to peel back here is the relationship between money and Latinos. Because I know growing up that we, especially if you're an immigrant, you have this working class mentality. You grind all week, you work for the man, then you collect the check, and then you save up your pennies. And then the only time you ever spend money is during Christmas, where you just blow your entire savings account on your family. I remember growing up modestly, but then looking back at our photos from Christmas Day, and it was hundreds of gifts underneath the tree. And I'm like, wait a minute, we were living very basic paycheck to paycheck. And yet on Christmas, we had 1,000 gifts. So talk to me about your relationship with money growing up. Did you kind of have that similar vibe?
I think my experience was a little different as a daughter of Mexican immigrants. I think in my family, there was no plan to save. It was always, if you need savings, you just ask family or friends. That was very much what was expected. But I can definitely relate to the over-the-top Christmas presents because I experienced that too. And of course, as a child, those are beautiful childhood memories. I remember that the biggest gifts were always from my grandparents. I didn't even have to look at the tag. I knew they were always from my grandparents, and I love them dearly for that, and I still do. But guess what? They've retired and they have zero retirement savings. So I think about things like that now that I'm a financial educator. I wish my grandparents had spent more modestly for the holidays instead of these big shebangs. Because as kids, we would have been happy either way, and they would have been in better financial standing today than they are now.
And financial literacy is a big thing. And I know, joking about our age again, when I was growing up, there was no such thing as financial literacy education anywhere. It's become more prevalent. More schools are teaching it. So give me some of that background for you. When did financial literacy end up on your radar? Was it in school? Was it you just proactively seeking it out? How did you learn to be financially literate?
Yeah. How did I wake up? Yeah. So I know, right? So let's see. What's funny is I went to college or into UC Santa Barbara. Shout out to any gauchos out there. And I majored in business economics. So I've always been kind of a numbers person. I learned about inflation, the recession, things like that. But they don't teach personal finance. They don't teach you how to manage your own money. So I entered adulthood with none of this knowledge, even though I was college educated. And it's because, like you mentioned, it's not really taught in schools. I know, fortunately, a lot of schools are starting to adopt it and teach it. But as the daughter of immigrants, my parents, they were in survival mode. They were just trying to get by and keep the lights on. They didn't really have capacity to master the financial system and teach me how to work it. So I understand now why I went into adulthood with none of those teachings. And that made for a very bumpy 20s. I had, some nightmare roommates, some bad boyfriend situations, toxic bosses, a lot of situations that I was stuck in and that I couldn't get out of because I didn't have money or family that could bail me out because they were living paycheck to paycheck themselves. So that was really, really frustrating to me. And it finally got to a point where I said, okay, what did I do wrong? If anything, I thought I did everything right. I went to college, I got a good degree, I got a corporate job. Why am I still struggling with money? And it's because I learned, you never learn how to manage the money that you have. So I said, all right, this can't be my excuse for the rest of my life. So let's learn. And I'm a big book reader. That's how I immerse myself in financial literacy. I read over 50 personal finance books. I just started and couldn't stop. And then once I gained the knowledge that I gained, I was kind of upset that other people didn't have access to this information, especially when it's such an important life skill. So I looked into sharing my knowledge with others. So I Googled how to teach financial literacy to others, and I came across a nonprofit called the YWCA, and I became a volunteer financial educator while I had my corporate job.
Wow, so cool. And when you got that light bulb moment of like, I'm just going to deep dive into all these books, was there a point where you're like, and I do this every once in a while when I learn something, do you like slap your forehead really hard and like, why didn't I know that? Did you have like a Homer Simpson type moment while you go along this journey?
Definitely not. I knew it wasn't my fault because, again, of my upbringing growing up in an immigrant home, I knew that my parents, I mean, they had a lot on their plate as immigrants, right? They moved away from their family. They had to learn a new language. They dealt with racism. They had, and low income jobs. They had a lot on their plate. So teaching their children financial literacy just wasn't feasible. It wasn't ever something that was ever going to happen for us. I was more upset that the system had put me into adulthood with no knowledge of how to manage this, which is why I'm so passionate of sharing this information with a younger audience. And TikTok has been the perfect avenue to do that because these kids are spending a bunch of time on TikTok, so let's throw in a little financial literacy every 3 or 4 videos, right? So that they actually learn something instead of just doom scrolling.
And how did you end up becoming the influencer? You mentioned TikTok. Like you talked about the steps of like you had this full-time job that you're doing this sort of like side hustle, volunteer side hustle of helping folks. Why did you think going to social media was the next step? Was it just because you had so much, like, I have so much more to share than just the individuals I'm working with every day?
Not at all. No, that was not how it happened. So to kind of paint the picture, I was very happy with my life. I had worked really hard to finally get to a company where I felt valued and seen and respected. And I was working my way up the corporate ladder. Shout out to Northern Trust. I had a great experience working with them. And that was my life, working there and going up the corporate ladder and on my free time volunteering. This was never supposed to be my full-time job. I didn't even know that you could do this as a full-time job, to be honest. And at the same time, I was saving aggressively because now that I had mastered money, I had this big goal of traveling the world. I wanted to quit my job for a year and see the world while I was young and take a sabbatical. So that was my life. So those were my intentions, my goals. But that all changed in March of 2021 when I came across a video on TikTok. At that time, I was just a user of TikTok. So I came across a video of this young, white, privileged woman who said she was in law school, and she shared that both her parents were also attorneys and that if she ever got stuck with any of her homework, she could easily call them up and they walk her through her casework. And it was just really out of touch for the times that we were living in. If you kind of take yourself back to March 2021, students were still struggling with remote learning. Like the pandemic was really hard. So I made a reaction video. They're called a stitch on TikTok, where I said, hey, if you saw this video and you're first gen, you're the first in your family to be navigating college and you don't have that type of support at home, don't feel that you're less than or that you're not going to be able to finish your college education. You're worthy. And of course, our road is a little tougher, but you're resilient, you're smart, you're gritty, you're going to figure this out. And I just put that as a positive message to the world, not really intending anything. But the comment section was like, wow, thank you for saying this. I saw this video earlier and it rubbed me the wrong way. Or thank you so much. I've been going through finals and it's been so tough to juggle everything as first gen. So that was my little light bulb moment of like, oh, instead of just mindlessly scrolling on TikTok, I can do what I've been doing in my community through the YWCA on the internet. And ever since then, I started creating TikTok videos just for fun. Again, another fun hobby on the side of volunteering. I went viral a month later, so I got really, really lucky. And when I went viral, I started getting paid opportunities. And I couldn't accept these paid opportunities with my traditional job because since I worked in banking, they're very, very regulated. And they actually denied my request to do this for work on the side. So I had to pick a choice, to stop doing TikTok altogether or to take a leap of faith. And here I am almost 3 years later.
Now, I got to ask you about your family. When you told them that, like,
everybody asked me that.
They must have been like, Gigi, have you lost your mind? Or as they say in Spanish, loca, have you gone loca from doing this?
Yeah.
What was the reaction from your family?
My parents are divorced, and it makes sense that they would have two different reactions, hence the divorce. So my mom was very supportive. She says, you're meant for this. She knew right away. She says, do it. You got the it factor. And my dad, on the opposite end of the spectrum, said, are you crazy? Yeah. ¿Para qué te quemaste las pestañas? Why did you work so hard on your education to throw it all? He said, to throw it all away. So dramatic, my dad. And I said, Dad, I'm not throwing it all away. Nobody's taking away my college degree. Nobody's taking away my 10 years of work experience. Nobody's taking away my professional connections. I'm just trying something different and seeing if it works out. He was not supportive. He was really like, you really need to think about this. And I'm like, I'm a big girl. I'll figure it out. And now that he's seen the success and the impact that I made in the community, he's my biggest cheerleader. I love my dad.
Well, I mean, it is great to have, I feel like as much as we take away from our parents, it's always great when we get multiple points of view because
Yeah.
the world is like that. Because the world, I feel like a lot of us are like, there's only one way of doing something. There's one that it's very black and white. But when you get those different opinions, and even though your dad didn't stop you from doing it, you probably that worry, you're probably like, okay, maybe I really should, because my dad's saying this, I should be even more focused than ever than just going in all in without thinking about the repercussions of it all.
It's also my parents' personality. My mom is she's been unemployed several times and I call her living La Vida Loca, so she's more, free-spirited, where my dad is the complete opposite. He's more disciplined, more organized. So I wasn't surprised by the reaction, but I am surprised that he's on board now, to tell you the truth.
By the way, Living La Vida Loca is my go-to karaoke song. I'm not sure.
I love that.
All right. So you make the jump. It's 3 years later. You become what they call a finfluencer. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly.
That's right.
What do you wake up thinking about doing every day? Is it just like, I'm just curious of your mindset, because I know I have that like immigrant grind of like, my mindset is wake up, do your work, and at the end of the day, have a beer, But what's your mindset in this role as an influencer to multiple generations of people in a way that you're changing their lives one video at a time?
Yeah, I mean, I love doing it. It doesn't even feel like work, and I feel so lucky. I always had heard about people that had these jobs that didn't feel like work, and I'm like, oh, they're so lucky, because my corporate job definitely feels like work, right? Working on an Excel spreadsheets all day and whatnot, sending out reports. But I'm so lucky that I am one of those people that found my passion, and it pays me well, and it makes an impact, so it really does all three. What keeps me going is just knowing that there's a lot of people that need to be served. A lot of first generation Latinas and other women of color. We have so many unique challenges with our money experience. I mean, we have the Latina pay gap. I think last year was 54 cents for every $1 a white male makes. Latinas have the second longest life expectancy. I think Asian women are first. So that means we need our money to last us longer. On top of that, a lot of us, as the daughter of immigrants, we have financial obligations to our family that a lot of other people may not. They instead may get to benefit from generational wealth passed on to them through inheritance or their parents paying for college. And for us, it's a very different picture. We have to take out debt to go to school and then financially support a lot of our extended family members. So I know that Latinas have a lot to tackle, and I want to help make it easier for them. But there's a lot of financial jargon, which I think is what intimidates a lot of my audience. In really embracing financial literacy, it makes them feel overwhelmed. It makes them feel like money is scary. So that's very much something that makes me different from other influencers out there, that even though I am an investment professional and I know all these fancy terms because I had to do them for my job, I really challenge myself to be jargon free and to use layman's terms to make it more accessible, because otherwise they get scared. And I think that's very much my superpower, being able to break down these difficult concepts into simple terms so that people can understand and be inspired and take action.
That's awesome. And I feel like when I made the jump from working terrestrial radio to working for Forbes Books, I had so many issues with the acronyms and the jargon.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if it's something systemic or just something that happens involuntary, where there's someone out there that says like, let's not make this so easy. Let's make it harder. And so they bring up all these acronyms and all they put.
It's funny that you say that because I have said that in videos that people that insist on using financial jargon when teaching financial literacy are gatekeeping this financial education from people because it is intimidating to people who are just beginners trying to learn, and they're trying to make it seem, well, I have all this knowledge, so this is why you should pay me. But no, break it down in simple terms and anybody can understand how money works.
I love that. The name of the book is Cultura and Cash. I'm sure you don't have a lot of interviewers saying it correctly like that, but what's the gist of Cultura and Cash?
The gist is it's the first money book unapologetically written for first-generation Latinas and other first-gen professionals. First-generation Latinas are definitely the people that are going to get the most out of the book because that's the primary reader. But other first-generation professionals, for example, one of my advanced readers is Filipina. I know some people that are Nigerian, first-generation Nigerian Americans, and they have found value in my content. So even though our experiences aren't exactly the same, they're similar in some sense. And it's really a book that exposes how our culture and our family and our community affect how we interact with money, which out of all the 50 personal finance books, that's never something that was addressed. They just taught you the ABCs of money. This is how you build a budget. This is how you build credit. Very robotic. And I learned from lived experience that there was more to it because especially with my family, I experienced a money culture clash that I didn't even know existed. And I really go deep into it in the book. But basically, the way that we handle money in America is very much from an individualistic point of view, where everyone is for themselves. If you get into financial troubles, you don't tell people about it. That's embarrassing. You figure it out. You charge on a credit card. And with most Latin Americans, they follow a collectivist money culture where money is communal, money is for the group. So if there is any sort of financial hardship, that's who you go to, family, friends. And again, back to in the beginning when I shared that that's what I saw growing up. My parents never had savings because they always knew they could ask my aunt or my uncle for a small loan. So when I tried to implement this individualistic American white advice with my Latino family, they're like, that's not how we do things. They're like, who are you now? So there was a lot of hardship and heartache with my family. And that's when I learned, okay, Americans aren't necessarily right, but neither are Latin Americans. And I'm bicultural, which means I kind of have to learn how to navigate too and find a blend of both that works for me according to my values. And that's very much what I hope my reader gets out of the book.
Oh, that's great. And I know much has been made of predatory lending. And in the Latin community, those predatory lenders have taken full advantage of it. And from my understanding, it's gotten better. There's been more rules and regulations depending on what city and state you are in. I'm not sure if you address this in the book or you talk about it much on TikTok, but what's the current state of predatory lending now for your community?
Yeah, it's not a topic that I address much, but I know it's something that our community is definitely subject to. And the reason for that is because these predatory lenders, they do more work in trying to make their service or product more inclusive in the sense that, like, if you go to one of these places, they will have a Spanish menu. So people are like, oh, I understand what it is. Where if you go to, I don't know, any other bank, they won't typically have the information in Spanish. So to them, it's like, oh, well, this is where I can understand what's being sold to me, what I'm signing up for. The traditional financial institutions need to take notes from them because they're doing that part very well. And unfortunately, it's harming our community. The other subject that I see is very prevalent in our community is life insurance agents. I don't know if you have any experience with them.
I mean, I see the TV ads all the time on YouTube.
And I did address that in the book because I used to intern for a very large life insurance company. And I warned my audience that term life insurance is great. If you have dependents or people that rely on your income, so if you unfortunately pass, those people are financially protected. But other life insurance will sell what's called whole life insurance, which typically has an investment component and it's very expensive. And it doesn't make sense for the average person. It makes sense for the 1%ers, and that's how they sell it to you. They're like, this is what rich people invest in. And it's true. That is what rich people invest in. But they also have collective cars. They also have art. They also have their 401ks and all these different investment accounts, properties, right? So that's one of the main things they invest in. And unfortunately, they very much prey on people by offering free financial checkups and offering this service that they don't really need.
It's funny. You made a great point about the lenders, because I think most people look at the stories of like, oh, okay, they're just taking advantage of communities, but they're not just doing it like in a dumb way. They're being very rather intelligent and proactive. I always say that about crooks, man. If they were able to use their superpowers in a good way, they could be so successful.
They change the world.
Yeah, they really can change the world. Well, speaking about one percenters, one of the endorsements for your book was Eva Longoria, which I'm trying
My favorite one percenter.
Yeah. Tell me about how that happened.
It's a dream come true because Eva Longoria is somebody that I have looked up to for 15 years. I was first introduced to her, like most people, through the very popular show Desperate Housewives, but I've gone on to follow her career post Desperate Housewives, and she's done a lot of amazing work in the Latino community, amplifying Latino stories, amplifying Latinas. So the fact that her name is on my cover and that she endorsed my book is still a pinch me moment. And the way that happened, for anybody that's curious, is I won a grant to write this book. So I didn't get a book deal through a traditional publisher. Yeah. So I won a $50,000 grant. It was called TikTok Latinx Creatives Grant. And that was through TikTok, sponsored through TikTok, Macro, and Unbelievable. And Unbelievable is one of Eva Longoria's production company. So that's how I was able to get in touch with her team and beg for that blur.
Oh my God, that's amazing. And it's funny, I was trying to remember, I met Eva Longoria in 2004, summer of 2004.
Wow. Was that before Desperate House?
It was the month before the show debuted.
Yeah.
Well, I was working for a radio station at the time, and they were doing this big premiere event at Disneyland out in Anaheim. They invited a bunch of radio people to interview folks, and most of the stars of Desperate Housewives were like the Terry Hatchers of the world.
Yeah.
You know, and knew them. And then they bring out Eva Longoria, and me as a young man, I was like, "Who the hell
is that?"
and then you watch her on Desperate Housewives. I was like, this person is going to be a star, because at the time, I think she had done some soaps and a little bit parts, and then obviously, as you mentioned, Desperate Housewives put it on the map. But I remember interviewing her, and she will not remember this because it was like me and 1,000 people. But just the poise that she had at such a young age in her first opportunity, and the fact that she was able to have that at such a young age and then be able to propel the rest of her career, not only as a creative, but also, like you mentioned, as an entrepreneur and becoming a director and doing all these amazing projects. I mean, one of these people that you're like, you know what, when they say don't meet your heroes, I think meeting Eva Longoria, that's an exception. It's okay to meet someone like Eva Longoria.
That's so good to hear. I'm so glad you shared that, because I am definitely manifesting that the book is successful and that I get to actually meet her in person. I have received a personalized video from her. That's a whole nother story. She Instagrammed me and sent me a video to a question that I had, and I posted on stories and she responded.
That's awesome. Now, there's one thing that I've learned from entrepreneurship, especially in the tech side, is you never put all your eggs in one basket. And the reason I bring this up is the late 90s, early 2000s is littered with companies that were built their backs on Facebook. And then one day Facebook said, nah, we don't want you to do that anymore. Change the algorithm. And all these companies just went out of business. Not all, but a lot of your eggs is in the TikTok basket. Are you diversifying into other social media platforms, other platforms? Because I feel like that is, especially, I mean, as a TikToker, you heard the news about the United States government trying to jump in and close TikTok or sell TikTok. Does that kind of stuff keep you up at night in terms of that being such a big driver for you and your business and to your community that one day the U.S. government can be like, nah, let's get rid of that TikTok and pull the plug? Tell me about how you're building up sort of your other platforms and your other ways of connecting to the audience minus a TikTok.
Yeah, of course. It is absolutely a concern, especially with this upcoming election. And depending on who gets elected, I think one of those potential presidents would really crack down on TikTok, which is scary because for me, it is my main source of income. I make money right now through brand deals. So I get sponsored by companies like Fidelity, Secret Deodorant, Verizon to promote their product or service on my TikTok channel. Right now, in my business model, that is my bread and butter. Besides being on TikTok, I'm also on other social media platforms. So I'm also on Instagram as well as LinkedIn. People are surprised to find out that I'm a LinkedIn creator. I was a part of the LinkedIn Creator Accelerator program, and that was fantastic. That's why I want to write the book. I'm like, if TikTok goes away, I will go away too. So how do I use the clout that I have on TikTok to make something out of myself? So I now have the book, Cultura and Cash. I'm also a speaker. I speak at various organizations on Latina advocacy in the workplace, or financial education, or financial inclusivity for financial institutions, a small business entrepreneurship. And I recently launched my own podcast. It's actually a continuation of the book. So it's also called Cultura and Cash.
Nice.
And for that same reason of just knowing that as a business owner, you cannot put all your eggs into one basket, and you kind of need to have a little bit of everything everywhere. Because you just don't control those platforms. Oh, and obviously I have my newsletter to try to kind of keep my community there, but that takes longer to build.
Nice. Good. Well, and I'm sorry if I sound like your father there. Like, if you're where you I always sound like your dad there. What's the thing? Check out TikTok. What are you
No,
gonna do?
it's a valid concern. And not a lot of people are thinking about it. So I'm glad we're having this discussion, because I'm a naturally anxious person. I'm actually on medication because my anxiety is very high. So I'm always thinking of the worst case or what could happen. So it helps me over prepare. So yeah, that's been on my mind for quite a long time.
Awesome. Another thing too is the algorithm, the mysterious TikTok algorithm.
Yeah, exactly.
If someone could figure out how it worked, someone would make a lot of money. If one day the algorithm changed, I brought up the Facebook example. I remember in the 2000s, it was that push to video. If you remember that, you're old enough to remember the 2000s. But the push to put video content on Facebook, and then all of a sudden Facebook changed their mind, and these companies and it built their following. They literally went out of business once the algorithm changed, and now you're seeing that with the journalism community, with Facebook all of a sudden dropping their news feeds and Twitter becoming what it's become. So that's why I was curious in terms of what else you were doing outside of TikTok, because it's so perilous to depend on just one outlet. The diversification is such a big part of any kind of influencer's career. So I'm glad. Again, I apologize if I sound like your dad there for a second.
No,
I was wondering what you were thinking about it.
I'm so glad you brought it up. And anybody that's listening that is also a content creator and feels overwhelmed of oh my God, I can barely handle one platform. Now you're telling me I have to be on 3 and have a podcast. I mean, you don't, but it would be smart too. And honestly, what I do is I just repurpose my content. Sometimes I'll make content just for TikTok or just for LinkedIn, but the majority of the time I recycle my content and put them on all 3 platforms.
All right. So now that you established that you're starting to diversify a little bit, can I ask you the time machine question? And I know this is kind of like a sort of a basic podcaster question, but I feel like the trajectory of your career has just been phenomenal. Like what you did for 3 years is staggering. But what does Gigi look like in 5, 10 years? And you've already mentioned you're an anxious person, so I wish I didn't ask you this question.
No. I think about it all the time.
Well, I bet you have a prepared answer for this, but what does Gigi look like in 5, 10 years?
Yeah, I'd say in 5 years, I definitely would have moved away more from my social media influencer personality to more of a thought leader and an author, maybe having a second book in the works. I plan to do more speaking and making that my main source of income, doing paid speaking work. I would love to continue to work with the government to make financial institutions more inclusive. I work with credit unions. I work with the National Credit Union Administration. I love to work with the White House, the Federal Reserve, and I think I'm uniquely qualified to do that because I'm a former investment professional, right? And I have a certificate in investment performance management. So I spent some time in the industry where you'll find a lot of content creators that are financial educators. Maybe they were past lawyers or past engineers, which there's nothing wrong with that, but they don't have the industry experience that I do. And so that would be the 5-year mark. And the 10-year mark, I would definitely say slowing down on the speaking because there's a lot of travel required with that. So I got to pay my speaking dues and do a lot of that at first. But I would like to slow down in the sense of where I have a completely location-dependent business where I do consulting from anywhere in the world, or I do money coaching from anywhere in the world. And the reason for that is because, remember, I was aggressively saving for my sabbatical that never happened. So that wanderlust is still there. It's still there. And right now I am still very much tied to the US. I'm location dependent in the US where I can live anywhere in the US. But I have to stay in the US because if I do any speaking work or any appearances, they're in the US. So yeah, that would be the 10-year goal where my business is set up in a place where I can do everything completely remote, do virtual speaking engagements, and I'm well paid and I get to fulfill my living abroad dreams.
Well, I'm sure your dad is happy to hear that you have
Thank
a
you.
5 and 10-year plan. Just Giovanna Gigi Gonzalez. Gigi, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. This is so much fun. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. And that's going to do it for another Forbes Books podcast. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. You can always connect with me on X, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Joe Pardavila. And oh yeah, TikTok at J Pardavila. Please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.